familiar to me.
I
Uh,
almost forgot to record. I got
oh gosh,
distracted.
we'd have to do it all again. Um,
Yes.
anyway, no, thanks for having me. And I'm going to talk about, well, I'll introduce myself a little bit more, I guess, and then I'll introduce our
Yeah,
question.
thank you, Carrie, because
I'm so excited
I
about, yeah.
messed up
Um,
on that.
I've been covering agriculture and the environment, as it pertains to public health and public policy since 1998, really. I've forgotten how, I've lost track of how many years that is. It's just, I feel really, really old. But I spent 17 years with Reuters, the international news agency, based in Kansas City, which is where I am now. And my main job was just to traipse around farm fields basically and learn everything I possibly could about the environmental and human health impacts and market economic impacts of farming and agriculture, the different, chemical inputs, from the different chemical inputs and fertilizers and weed killers and all to, animal livestock operations and all of that. So I've literally been in hundreds of farm fields and I've been in Iowa so many times and really just feel very grateful and blessed to have spent so many years doing this and come to have a real appreciation for farmers and also just this continued sort of uh, curiosity is probably the wrong word, I guess, but the paradoxical sort of nature of, agriculture and farming, which is so crucial, right? We all eat, we need food, and farmers are fundamental to keeping us all healthy and safe and productive. But at the same time, uh, what has been pushed on and what we promote, what our federal policies and state policies promote are many of these farming practices that actually are hurting us and hurting our environment and hurting our health. And Iowa certainly has become, sort of the cautionary tale or the ground zero, as Christine said, for what's going wrong and things that we really need to address. And this brings me to my special guest, Keith Schneider. He's a longtime journalist, former national correspondent at New York Times, journalist, just brilliant writer, and he is an editor and a writer at Circle of Blue. Also works with me at the news outlet that I run now, the New Lead, which is a project of the Environmental Working Group. And he has really just very deep insights into so many elements of this that go beyond just what the science says and how people are being impacted and what the data says. He has really deep and thoughtful insights. So I'm hoping that he can you know be very additive to this conversation. Um, Christine did ask me to show a few slides for maybe people who aren't as familiar with what's going on in Iowa. So I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, a little cold. I assume everybody can see. Christine, can you confirm?
Yes. Great.
Yes.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. So as we said, Iowa really seems to be the cautionary tale for what can go wrong, with our food and farming system, what is going wrong in so many places around the country, around the world, as we've let sort of corporate agendas drive how we grow our food and how we treat our livestock. Um, Iowa, is one of the top farm states in the nation. 87,000 farms, first in the country for corn and pork and egg production. Also, one of the top states for growing soybeans and producing cattle. Uh, 35.7 million acres, 31 million of that devoted to farming. As you drive through Iowa, as I've done many times, just corn and soybean fields and livestock operations everywhere you look. So, the state's economy is very dependent on agriculture, obviously, and state lawmakers and corporate agriculture really has a very powerful voice, as I'm sure all of you are aware. Iowa, unfortunately, also has become very well known and very prominent for its rates of cancer. Keith, I think, was one of the first people to point this out in his reporting that Iowa, is being distinguished as second in the nation for incident rates of cancer, following only Kentucky, which has high rates of lung cancer and attributes a lot of its cancer rates there to smoking. But Iowa has this, really unfortunate distinction now. And if you look over a few columns and you see that little red arrow, you see that Iowa is one of only states where cancer is rising. You have these rising incident rates. And I couldn't show you all of the states. This is just a snapshot. But if you go to the National Cancer Institute and look at this 5-year average data, you can see that is true, that Iowa is distinguished for this very unfortunate reason. This is from the 2025 Cancer Registry report. You can see that lung and colon cancer, prostate, all of these different things are affecting and killing Iowans right now. New cancers among Iowa residents, over 20,000 every year. This is a problem that's affecting so many people in Iowa. And, if you've been following Christine's work, as I'm sure you have, and many other organizations, there are different people, different researchers that have been really working to get to the bottom of this and still are, and trying to understand what is driving, this cancer crisis in Iowa. There are different suspects, different suspected culprits, radon. Some people point to radon as an issue. Iowa has the largest percentage of homes in the nation that are at or above the EPA's action level for levels of radon, which is known to cause lung cancer. Your state officials point to alcohol consumption. Of course, PFAS is a growing concern. These industrial chemicals that are used in so many consumer products and are found in our waste stream quite prevalently, and have become part of the sewage sludge that's regularly spread on farm fields as part of this fertilization process. So those are all things that people are looking at. But emerging research in Iowa has also pointed the finger at pesticides, and particularly, and also fertilizers, nitrate levels, animal livestock manure that's spread on the farm fields, pesticides, that are used, atrazine, glyphosate, and a whole array of others are linked to a range of diseases and cancers. Nitrates are also tied to cancer, particularly when they're consumed in drinking water or in other dietary sources. There's just a whole lot of research that goes back decades that shows that this is the case. And you're seeing high levels of nitrate, in well water and surface water. And this is due to the runoff that happens when you have nitrogen applications, be it chemical fertilizer or animal manure. And this runs off and gets into the water streams. This is a quote from the National Cancer Institute. Colon, kidney, again, stomach cancer, all of these things are real risks for people who are being exposed to nitrate in their drinking water. Pregnant women are known to be, at particular risk, and their babies. There's all sorts of problems, neurodevelopmental harm that can happen to children, babies in utero, and then, you have, of course, blue baby syndrome, which has long been known to be a concern with young children who are exposed to nitrates in the water. The average, for the US EPA still is stuck on this decades old sort of action level of 10 milligrams per liter. This dates back many, many years to the 1990s. Many people, many environmental health and public health officials, and experts have looked at this and really believe and warn that this level is way too high. And they think that it should be maybe 10 times lower. And if you look at, this is from the Raccoon River there in Iowa, and you look at these levels and you see that it's frequently spiking. This isn't a rare occurrence by any means in Iowa to have these high levels of nitrates. Number of days above this action level, you can see this as well. It's just Iowa has a very worrisome situation with its nitrates. But again, Iowa's not alone. I've been reporting about this. Many other people have, Keith has been a leader in reporting on this. You can see some of the quotes here from Carey Gillam from the Iowa Environmental Council. she grew up in Iowa. She's seen this all around. She's one of the many people trying to do something to change this. Um, you had the report come out in late summer. This result of 2 years of study by really high level scientists and researchers who've looked at this and really trying to raise a red flag and an alarm, sound an alarm that we have to do something about agricultural policies if we want to clean up our drinking water and we want to help people's health improve. Um, Not just Iowa, Iowa is sort of, as you said, the cautionary tale, or maybe the canary in the coal mine, whatever little phrase we want to give it. But certainly we need to look at what we're doing to our health around the country with the way that we're growing our food. The Washington Post put together, a really great database and a report on this, showing, it isn't just Iowa by any means. We're being impacted in many other states around the country. And I just, before we get into our discussion, you can see some of the stories that I've done and that Keith has done, and reporting on a whole lot of other issues at this news outlet, the New Lead, which is again, where I've landed now in my latter years. But we're really trying to cover this on the ground, and we've got some video coverage and video reports and different stories, and we're welcoming news tips and anything people want to reach out and talk to us about. So I appreciate that. Um, I'd love to invite Keith to weigh in. He's got some really good insights on this and on national and
Christine,
local.
are we gonna take questions, or you want me to just weigh in here? Add to
Oh,
what
I'd love.
go. I would say go ahead and talk right now,
Yeah.
and then we can take questions afterwards. If you have some questions, if you want to put them in the chat box, we'll try to go back in and get those. But it'd be nice to hear from you, Keith, and we're super grateful that you're with us this evening. It's just icing on the cake, and we're just super privileged to have both of you on with us, and because you do know so much about the whole uh, picture, and not only
Yeah, I,
but how this
I
fits
think
in.
if Keith could talk about his perspective on where Iowa sits in this national perspective, because he's looked at so many different states and has really drilled down into the data and tell us what you see. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of cough.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here and an honor. Appreciate the opportunity. So I've been an environmental journalist for a long time. I covered 3 Mile Island back in 1979 as a cub reporter. And I've been involved with major projects through my career for, important news organizations, among them the New Lead, the New York Times, the Guardian, others. This is probably the most important project that I've undertaken as a journalist. It's produced since I started in 22, some really dramatic uh, consequences for the public interest, particularly in Michigan and in Iowa. In Iowa, water quality and cancer are now political issues in the race for agriculture secretary and for governor this year. And in Michigan, we in 2024 had a striking, the best environmental decision by our Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, which said that our Department of Environment, I'm based in Michigan, our Department of Environment has full authority to regulate discharges from animal agriculture in this state. And then in October, our Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Environmental Energy issued some really striking regulations to actually stem the flow discharges into the water from concentrated animal feeding operations, our CAFOs. We have 291 in Michigan. And so journalism is an important piece of this. That is understanding what the story is and getting out the data. And Iowa's the middle of this. Iowa is the ground zero. Iowa has the worst water quality in the United States. It has some of the worst water quality in the world. I know this. I've reported in India. I've reported in China. I've reported in Africa. There isn't a place to swim in Iowa, or almost no place to swim in Iowa in the summer. So many of Iowa's cities are now drinking water is contaminated with high levels of nitrate. The cancer incidence in Iowa is off the hook and rising. There's indications that Iowa could overtake Kentucky as the highest cancer incidence in the country. And I don't think there's much doubt about where the source of all this is. The source of all this is from discharges, both chemicals and nutrients, into the environment from Iowa's massive agricultural sector. Now, I have great respect for farmers, and I have really great respect for farm companies. But these companies and these farmers are now technically qualified, scientifically qualified, economically qualified to do in my view, a much more responsible job managing and overseeing their discharges. There's no excuse for a major 20,000 or 10,000 head dairy to take its manure and spread it on the land when they could treat it in a pocket treatment plant or or rally with their neighbors to get a bigger treatment plant. There's no there in my view, there is so much opportunity to assist agriculture in Iowa or any other state to responsibly manage its waste. And there's opportunity for states like Iowa, certainly Michigan has taken this state, to begin to regulate this discharge. There is no excuse for having a vital, in my view, a vital industry that is so large as agriculture to spread its waste willy-nilly. Now, how can they do this? And I'll stop there. Why is this possible? Well, it's possible because in 1972, when Congress passed the Clean Water Act, they exempted agriculture from oversight of its discharges. They essentially said we're going to take care of those discharges we can manage around a pipe, right? But we can't deal with what's going on the land, what's spread on the land. We just can't do it. So we've decided we're going to resubstitute voluntary voluntary measures to encourage farmers to do things like plant cover crops and put buffers around streams and do things like that. Actually, try to soak up the nitrogen and phosphorus and fertilizers that's coming off and pesticides coming off the land. Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because farmers don't do it. Farmers don't want to use it. And we've spent billions, billions. And I've done a piece for Carey last year about this, where nitrates alone, there's a billion pounds of nitrates coming off of Iowa's ground into the Mississippi drainage and down to the Gulf of Mexico and helping to pollute and cause a huge dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi River. And that thing isn't getting any smaller, any bigger. It's still there. And it's Illinois, it's Wisconsin, it's Iowa, it's Minnesota, and it's the downstream states, Indiana, through the Ohio River. And so we're going to not only pollute the waters of our upper Midwest, we're going to also, pollute the waters in the Gulf of Mexico. So I think I'll stop there. I mean, what I call it is a national scandal. This is a national scandal, and Iowans are now being exposed to the brunt of it, not only in your drinking water but also in your health. I mean, that's where Iowa is, and it's going to take Iowans to change that.
Wow, Keith. Um, that's that's a pretty good overview. Do you think, just, I don't see any questions yet, or nobody's raising their hand yet, but I wanted to get your perspective about what we can expect. Like, do you think that we have any way to get around this or to make progress under these current environment, politically speaking?
Well, where there's been progress in managing discharges from industrial agriculture, change in that is very difficult. They come in increments. In Michigan, it took years, and a collaboration between state government and the Department of Energy, Department of Environment, the Attorney General, a bunch of nonprofit environmental law firms, and journalism to raise the attention to the pollution that was occurring in Lake Erie and in some of our major, coastal waters and rivers. And we have a Democratic governor, and we have a Democratic Attorney General. We have the former chairman of one of our environmental groups, who's now the head of our environmental agency. That's what it took to get important but incremental change in how our livestock agriculture manages its waste. Iowa has none of that. I mean, there is no lineup of the political infrastructure in your state. And only in the last, when I first got to Iowa to write about this in 2023, there wasn't anywhere near the furor that there is now about these issues. I mean, people sort of knew this was happening, and They really didn't have an understanding of the cancer incidence. They kind of knew that the nitrates were an issue. Chris Jones, who's now running for Iowa secretary, was doing these, really, really stellar pieces on his blog for the University of Iowa and Iowa State, and he was running the monitoring district. Iowa did have one of the largest and most comprehensive statewide stream monitoring programs for any state in the country. Of course, he got pushed out by the big ag in the Senate, particularly of his job, and now that monitoring program is in trouble if it's not already dead. That is the information and the knowledge of what was happening in different streams in real time with on a map on the computer. You could find out where the nitrogen was. So Iowa doesn't even want to know what's happening
Right.
with its water, right? So it's going to take some changes in state government for sure. And it also is going to need, in my view, it's going to need changes in the agricultural, in Iowa State and its allies. I mean, Iowa State is captured by big ag. And one of the pieces I did for the new lead talked about how Iowa State in the 80s, a university professor had developed a very easy to use, very, very efficient, not costly way to measure how much nitrate should go on their fields. The early spring nitrate test. His name was oh gosh. Anyway, he he developed this test that proved really effective in helping to reduce costs for farmers and to reduce the levels of fertilizer being spread on farm fields in Iowa, and it was deep sixth. I mean, Iowa State deep sixth that as quickly as it could. You haven't heard about it since. But that's the kind of thing that's happening in Iowa State. I was at Iowa State in November of 2024 when there was a major conference on biodigestion.
Mhm.
For those who know, biodigestion is taking manure and cooking it and then streaming off the methane, putting it into pipes and shipping it for fuel for power plants or for transportation, mostly to California. And Iowa State was so geeked about this technology as a new incredible new way to both manage manure and to help solve pollution. I felt like what it must have been like when the Atomic Energy Commission first introduced nuclear power, civilian nuclear power, in which they said it was too cheap to meter. Well, it turned out to be a lot more expensive and a lot difficult to manage. And biodigesters, which are the result of largely the result of the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act from the Biden administration, put a lot of money into the clean energy pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act into agriculture as a renewable fuel. So what they essentially did was to make more federal support for ethanol as a renewable fuel, and more support for livestock agriculture for manure to turn into methane. And we reported that singular change in our policy, like $160 billion worth, was going to make this manure nitrate problem worse in Iowa, particularly, but also across the Corn Belt. So our policies are not lining up with our concerns, right? Our policies are designed to concentrate and to make things more efficient, but in doing so, we're producing these negative effects on health and the environment, particularly in Iowa.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would just second that. I'm sorry, I'm so glad that Keith joined us because I'm having a really hard time with this leftover cold and flu thing going on. But yeah, I just, getting Chris Jones in, even just changing, if you could change the power structure in Iowa, I still don't think like that's enough overall because, farmers are driven by their own self-interest. They have to be like any business person, anybody who has to, feed their families. And our federal policies, and the money that gets handed down to farmers doesn't encourage the kind of practices that we need to make our environment healthier and ourselves healthier. It encourages the opposite almost. And Keith has just given many good examples about that. So I think it's wholesale change at the federal and state level, which is a pretty big ask, right? But I think, the first steps come in awareness and education and engagement, and certainly you're seeing, a lot of that in Iowa. People are just have had it and seem to be committed to the long fight.
Well, yeah, and just like the state cut out the water monitoring funding, which the University of Iowa is still struggling to get some funding. We actually set up a GoFundMe campaign about 2 months ago, and we've almost got 5 monitors funded. But in Polk County Conservation Board of Directors allocated $200,000 to go toward that monitoring system, but they're still looking for support because that money runs out in the like June 2026. So we're just trying to get some breathing room so that we can work on policy, but that's part of this picture too. They don't want to see the real numbers. And Chris Jones, as you pointed out, his blog had a good analysis of what was going on with those numbers, and nobody liked it. So the easiest way, so that we don't know what's going on, is not to have, water monitoring. Then
Right.
we don't know. And then they can just say, oh, the practices are working. The nutrient reduction strategy is working here in Iowa. So,
Well, that's another example. I mean, Iowa has this nutrient reduction strategy. It doesn't work. It's not working. It hasn't made any effect. In fact, things are getting worse. And that's because it's devoted a lot of its effort into these voluntary means to try to stem, soak up what's coming off the land. It's not working. It can work individually. I've seen it work individually on farms. I've talked to farmers who've done those things, but it's not widespread enough or dense enough to make a difference. And what could make a difference, as I say, is if you have a 20,000 head of cattle in a feed yard, you ought to put a wastewater treatment plant on it. We have the technology to make it better, a lot better, but we don't. And that I mean, some of the most technically, scientifically capable companies in the world are involved in American agriculture. I mean, come on, John Deere. I mean, they know how to do engineering, right? These chemical companies they know how to do what they're doing. You know, um, the major dairies. I mean, in Minnesota, Riverview Dairy has 10,000 cattle, dairy animals in one place. And in Arizona, they have 130,000 heifers that they're raising, east of Tucson. I've seen them both. I've been to both of them. I mean, the companies that are capable of doing that also are capable of putting on, wastewater treatment plant on their operations in order to spread, irrigate with clean water, but they don't, and they're not forced to. And that's the point. We have as a society need to say, wait, you know, you're getting $13 a pound for hamburger or whatever I'm spending at the groceries. It's not like you can't make money at it, right? So I don't understand. I mean, I guess I do understand. It's kind of like the railroad going into the, California in the West in the, 1880s. It's just so anything goes in how the industrialization takes place. But people are getting hurt by it. We're getting hurt by it in Michigan, and you're definitely getting hurt by it in Iowa. And in order to change it, needs to be real significant change at the policy level and at the grassroots level. You got to stand up and go, hey, we don't want this anymore. We got to change this. And you, the industry, have the means to do it. These are not poor companies.
so we have Ken Brown has his hand up, and so Ken, why don't we let you ask your question, and then I think we have a few comments in the chat box. Bob Riley's mentioned a few, and maybe we ought to let him talk after Ken, because he is a big agriculture business guy here in Iowa and really understands the whole situation. Where did Ken go?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Now, yep, you're unmuted. Yes.
I lowered my hand. I'm more aware probably than the average person about this because of what I've done for a living. But the problem is obvious to me, and it's becoming more obvious to other folks. And that report that we got through Drake and the Harkin Institute was wonderful. So what are we going to do? I mean, really, what are we going to do? The problem is there, but what are we going to do? I mean, are we going to file a lawsuit? Are we going to sue the state to for nothing else to reintroduce these the monitoring sites? I just know the problem's there and it's obvious. And I'm going to ask it one more time. What are we going to do? I know who's running the state. I know who's running, the Congress, the Senate, and I get it. So, is there a plan? That's really all I have to ask.
Well, I would suggest to pick something that you can change. So in Michigan, we went after, we focused on pollution in Lake Erie, focused on the levels of nitrates and phosphorus leak, pouring into Lake Erie from Michigan, and made the case that we can do a better job in managing that. But we need the Department of Environment to help us, right? We need Department of Environment help us, and we need the courts to help us. And we got a big win. I mean, comparatively to what was happening before. So I don't think we can take, everything at once, but we pick off one at a time until we build the momentum to make the significant changes. But I say again that the companies themselves need to be held accountable some way. That they need to be, convinced in some way that what's happening in Iowa is unacceptable and it's dangerous and it needs to change. And so the first thing is to maybe change some of the legislative power. Maybe that's one place, but you also got to change it in the university system too and get some more advocacy. I mean, the Adolf Leopold Center is basically defunct in Iowa now, and that was a major, site of research for sustainable agriculture. So the agribusiness has been very good at piece by piece by piece diminishing the effect of any grassroots effort on this, right? I mean, they even are diminishing your way of finding out and understanding how much nitrate's in the water. And by the way, let me just say one thing about the Chris Jones. I broke that story. I met Chris early in our project with the new league, and I interviewed him on this case because he knew on this issue because he knew so much. And this was early 2023. And then I learned that the university was pushing him out because of what he was writing and challenging, the state senator whose son-in-law ran a big cattle operation on a creek in northeast Bloody Run Creek,
Bloody Run.
Iowa. Well, okay, so they're pushing him out. University of Iowa and Iowa State didn't say a damn thing about it. They never mentioned a word. I called them. I said, well, do you have any, response to this? The guy you hired to put together this, world-leading network of monitoring in your state on the streams, 66 stations, is being pushed out. They never said a word, not a word to me. So it gives you an idea that there isn't a lot of courage also in the system. So we need to introduce I think we need to introduce a little courage in the system. And Chris is running, he's stepping up. He's not a politician, but he's running for Secretary of Agriculture. I don't know if he can get through the primary. If he does get through the primary, this will be the most important race for a prominent agricultural position, elected position in the United States since Jim Hightower was elected Texas Ag Commissioner in 1982. And he wasn't a farmer either, but he was a great orator and a brilliant strategist and had made his mark as a young guy in Washington critiquing the land grant system, the agricultural research system, which was only then, this is the 1970s, really getting captured by agribusiness. So if Chris gets through the primary, if he's articulate, if he can tell his story, if his message is resonant, that could be a start, a really important start. Of course, they're going to come after him like a ton of bricks. I asked him today, I interviewed him today. I said, are you ready for that? You got any skeletons in your closet? Because they're going to find them. He said, oh, I don't know if I got any skeletons. So, he's not a politician, but he better be a good spokesman for what he's trying to do.
And I guess what I'm saying is, I get all that, and I really appreciate. I just joined the Izaak Walton League a year or so ago. I really appreciate these talks. Um, it's going to take more than just these talks. It's going to take a number of different groups getting together. Is and I guess is there a synergy that's happening that I'm not aware of because I'm ignorant about a lot of things, where we can get multiple environmental groups together, journalists like yourselves to assist us in getting this message out? Because I don't think this gentleman's going to be elected to any office. This is going to take a decade at least, and unfortunately, a lot of people are going to have to die, and a lot of people are going to get sick, and that's what it's going to take, because that's what it's taken to get to this point. And so I'm willing to go fund and put some money up, all that stuff. But I'm hoping I'm not that person, but I'm hoping there's someone that's building a group of people to join together, and we can get some momentum at a grassroots level. Because I agree that's the only way it's going to change, and that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much, Keith, for what you had to say. I appreciate
There's a growing furor in Iowa. For a time, Chris is president of the Driftless Water Defenders in Decorah, near Decorah, Northeast Iowa, run by James LaRue, really, really prominent lawyer on these issues. And there's others, um, and there have been protests. I mean, as I say, the conversation, the concern, the furor around these issues is much more significant now than it was 3 years ago when I started working in Iowa. I mean, there wasn't very much of anything happening there, basically. And there's a lot happening there now. So that's a start. And well, I hope you're wrong about Chris Jones, but you're probably right. I don't know.
Well,
I would just like to throw something out there. I talk a lot to leaders within the grassroots MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, which is, separate and distinct from the MAHA commission set up by the Trump administration. And these are, the moms, the MAHA moms and the farmers and the others who are part of this MAHA commission. And I just wonder, if you're looking for a one-stop shop, a cohesive group that has the ear of Lee, Evslin at the EPA, and is walking the halls of Capitol Hill like all the time and really trying to put the pressure on. This is a group that, it's we don't know yet. Like, are they gonna, they're splintering a little bit, and they're feeling pretty betrayed at this point. And, I had one of the MAHA leaders tell me the other day, I didn't realize the corruption was so rampant. Well, my God, where have you been? Right. Um, but, and I'm talking to another guy with Heartland Health Research. They're trying to put together a platform for Democrats in the midterms and going forward to adopt kind of their own MAHA. But there is this sort of groundswell from, beyond Iowa, across the country, I think, right? Where people are saying, we're tired of being sick. We're tired of chronic disease. We need healthier food. We need a healthier environment. There's nothing more fundamental to that, foundational to that, than farming and agriculture. And regenerative agriculture is a big component of the platform of these groups. If you could, if there somehow could be this national, if it's not called MAHA, it's called something else. The Republicans grabbed up Bobby Kennedy because he had this MAHA thing going on and had some granola crunchy people that really, I think, helped, Trump win over independents. But Democrats need to wake up to that too. They talk a good game, but you don't see a food and farming policy at the top of an agenda a lot of times in these national elections. Um, and I think with the MAHA, we've kind of elevated that discussion. You're seeing a lot more of that now, and you're seeing candidates being asked about that. And I think that's, you've got Iowa as the micro example, but in the macro for our entire country, you really do need a cohesive movement and very loud voices talking about these issues in Washington. So again, I'm not a activist, advocacy, lobbyist person. I don't know, but this MAHA thing is the first thing I've seen that is really getting the ear of some people inside the EPA. Whether or not they actually do anything about it, we'll see. They seem to think that they're going to get, some bones thrown their way, crumbs thrown their way here in the next several weeks that might be announced. But
Well, I also note that Iowa is the only state that I've been in where water quality and health are really in significant salient issues in this election, in this year.
Yeah.
I haven't been in any other state in the Midwest, on the West Coast, in the South for sure, in New England, and I'm all over the country, and
well,
it's
a lot more people are talking about these in states, I think, because of, the moves by Bayer and Modern Ag Alliance and these others
yeah.
that are trying to drive these pesticide protection bills in these different states. Tennessee is taking this up tomorrow in the House. They've got a bill, and a lot of people think that maybe that's going to pass. But they're pushing these issues, and so they are getting some news attention in these different states. That, oh, well, what do we mean, and what are we doing with pesticides, and what are the impacts? And um, I
Are there
think,
any that Carrie, that where water quality and cancer are salient political issues in the
oh
state?
no, not like in Iowa. No, not for
Oh,
sure.
so that's what I'm saying. So there's enough of a concern and conversation about it, that it is salient now politically in Iowa. So
Oh yeah, for
that's
sure.
in an era in which the White House is attacking the entire environmental era that I've made my career on in my life. I mean, the whole thing is under attack, and Iowa is one where, hey, wait a second, I'm sure that's the right way to go. I mean, you want to know where Trump's environmental program will lead if it's successful over time? I wrote a column about this earlier this year. Look at Iowa, right? This is what
Yeah.
happened in Iowa, which disregarded its environment, disregarded its water, allowed an industry to sort of take command of its infrastructure on regulatory infrastructure, right? And the citizens sort of sat there and watched it all happen. Well, that's what's going to happen to Americans, certainly in the upper Midwest, if we allow, without any pushback, what's happening to the policy infrastructure in Washington, the federal policy
Right.
infrastructure.
Right.
Um,
Trump announced, I told Christine today, there's a press release out by the EPA dated today about the 500 environmental wins, policy measures that the EPA has implemented since Trump took office that are a win for the environment. And it's just
look at that.
laughable to go through those.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I do want to point out that Carey was on the ground reporting when we had the CISRA report at the Harkin Institute, August 4th, I believe it
Yeah.
was, first part of August. And she did some really great reporting, and quite a few little video clips were done with interviews from some of our people, some of the legislators as well. And they were really well done. And you can find those links on the Harkin Institute too. And they still have those there. So
Right.
that just
Yeah, we're doing our best to try to shine a light. And what we find a lot of times in journalism world, it, the ripple effect. You do a story and do another story, and then another outlet, and then more outlets, and then more outlets. And you've seen the New York Times paying attention to this, and again, the Washington Post and big outlets. So every little bit of news that we can share, I think, can be amplified and bring this story to life on a bigger platform.
That's great. Bob Riley, do you want to say anything? You put a couple of things in the chat box. Do you want to talk to?
Okay.
You're so well.
Well, I've been in the ag business and the environmental business for 40 years, and so I've had a foot in both territories, and so I help animal agriculture and try to do good stuff with nutrients on the ground. But the key that we have is that, as I put in the chat, that Farm Bureau runs the universities through their influence at the State House, and so they have the purse strings. So it isn't really a question of whether or not the universities have any courage. They can have courage when they are in shackles, financial shackles from the state. And so that is, I know lots of folks at the university level who have phenomenal skills and intent to make good environmental decisions, but their hands are tied because of the funding. And that's, as you saw that with the Leopold Center, and you saw that with the monitoring system. They can't do anything. I mean, everything they do, we now have a new freedom of something center in Iowa City because they think that there's too many communists down there, so they gotta import some conservatives from someplace. But regardless of that, I've spoken a lot with Rick Baum and Jim LaRue trying to figure out how we do this legally. And of course, the landscape in Iowa is the same as it is nationally from the standpoint that the Republicans have packed the Supreme Court. And so trying to figure out how to, redo the lawsuit that we had with Bill Stowe against the drainage districts is or something like that, even with Nishabotna or Bloody Run is almost an impossibility because of the way the courts are structured. So I'm not quite sure how that whole thing runs through the system. I've just talked with Tom Vilsack the other night, and he and I have compared notes for years on how to flip the system to be more to not subsidize corn and beans and the crops, but to subsidize, in essence, regenerative agriculture, subsidize the soil tests that show that we are increasing the fertility of the soil for 20 generations down the pipeline, rather than depleting it, which we are doing, as we all know. And the key is the distribution of all those nutrients and the control of those nutrients. We only have enough manure applied in the state of Iowa to cover 23% of the corn and bean nutrient needs. So it's really a question of location and the inability to put the manure where it belongs and to control it where it goes. And so, I don't have any particular issue with CAFO from a practical standpoint. Socially that might be a little different, but from a practical standpoint, a CAFO can control all the molecules that are produced there and put them in the right place at the right time. And so, we have these various things like the Nature Conservancy is doing a 4Rs plus, right place, right time, right amount, right product. And the plus portion of it is taking all those things that were in the nutrient reduction suggestion. Do not call it a strategy because there was never any intent to put it into practice, but to take the practices that were in the nutrient reduction suggestion and put those along with the 4Rs, and you can then control every molecule and where it goes. But without the switch, and to me, it's the prisoner's dilemma that we have. Without the switch of the farmer being enslaved to the commodity systems and the government subsidies, we cannot make any progress. So we have to switch that to pay people for good soil instead of paying them for more corn and more beans.
Oh, what was Vilsack's response to you when you discussed that?
Well, he's been talking about this for more than 10 years. He's going to be writing a book on it, but he sees that, he understands that. And I think during his tenure, I don't know, he's been there for a long time. There have been more things coming out in the Farm Bill about soil quality and some of the programs that are necessary there, the CSP programs, the EQIP programs, and some of those that provide incentives to farmers to do the right thing on soil. But this next Farm Bill, if there ever is one, probably won't have anything like that in it because we've now divorced the SNAP benefits and the food programs from the farm programs. And that was a holy alliance that allowed rural and urban to get together and put together a farm bill. But by splitting out the food aid, it now allows the Farm Bureau and the agribusinesses to just run amok and say, screw those people that are not very, that are hungry, you know. So I don't know where we're going to be next on that.
Can I just offer one sort of final thought about this?
That would be great.
So in my reporting on this in Iowa and other states, I kept thinking back to how vulnerable this system of production is to any number of catastrophic insults, whether it's a virus in the hog sector or a virus in the corn sector, because the concentration of animals, the uniformity of crops, um, you just and the weather, that this system, while powerful, is very vulnerable to catastrophic change, a catastrophe. And I kept thinking, a virus goes through a 10,000 head dairy that's either reduces the production or kills animals would be catastrophic to that company. But imagine if it, like what happened in the chicken industry with the virus that went through the chicken. But so I'm thinking this, and we're not. This system is not as robust as we'd like to think it is. It pollutes. It's not performing well for farmers, right? They're not getting the kinds of income that they want. It's a really difficult job, lots of value to it, a lot of difficult job, and they're fighting all kinds of um, potential disasters, either on their farm or in their industry. And if that occurs, God bless, if that occurs, it will change. It will change everything. And let me just tell you, this is not agriculture, but in Michigan, we have a pipeline, an oil pipeline that crosses the Great Lakes. It's 70 some odd years old. It's been struck by anchors. And the state has been trying to shut it down, and the feds are saying, no, we have primacy, and they just won a federal case about that. But if this line ruptures, right? If it ruptures, it will pour millions of barrels of oil into the Great Lakes and ruin, according to the University of Michigan, thousands of miles of Great Lakes coastline. That will change the dynamic of whether to shut it down or not. And do we have to wait for a catastrophe in agriculture in order to change this system?
I love Denise's comment. I guess I'm going to read Denise's comment as my final comment. Take out the corporate interests. Need strong, committed leadership, political will. I mean, that's definitely what it all comes back to, right?
Yeah.
Is how do you fight, the corporate interest. And
It's greed and short-term thinking in a nutshell, right?
yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, I appreciate you having us here tonight and
Thank you.
spotlighting some of the reporting. And you guys are the people we learn from and who guide us in our reporting. So I'd love to hear from people if you have ideas for stories we should be writing about, things we should be thinking about, research we should be doing. Please reach out to me. You can Google, the new lead, thenewlead.org, LEDE, and find our contact information. Or maybe you can provide it, Christine.
Yeah, I will. I will definitely do that. I'll send out the link and we'll get this edited and uploaded to YouTube and share it widely. So we're super grateful for everybody's time this evening and especially Carey and Keith's. It was a real fun surprise to have Keith join us this evening as well. And thanks to everybody for taking time out to join us this evening. And do we have any other questions before we close off? Guess we're good. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, and have a beautiful
Yeah.
evening. And we have Jay Gorsh with the School of the Wild next month, and we'll be posting information about that. he's doing a great job with getting young kids involved with outdoors and education. So thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Great.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.